being punished for the deeds of white people's ancestors. Most white people are not descendants of slave owners.
This racial argument definitely brought some steam to it, you guys. What's good, beautiful people? I hope that you're doing amazing. Thank you so much for clicking. In this video, the man is just showing different personalities, or should I say different people? Anyway, imaginary people discussing or having an argument about race. And at the end of the video, he tries to bring it together to say it's about inclusiveness or strike in the middle with whichever extreme that we are operating here. And we know that there's a white extreme and there's a black extreme, right? So if we come in the middle with regards many things, then we can operate as one society. But when does that start, right? When does that start? This argument goes over many different topics, so make sure you watch this video. Different people have brought different reactions on TikTok, and I have compiled some stitches together for you guys to watch their reaction. So let's watch this video and then we'll come back and discuss.
God, all white people are racist. That statement is racist. White people can't be victims of racism. Any discrimination based on skin color is racism. No, racism only exists when discrimination carries the power to oppress. And since white people have all the power, they can't be oppressed. And if they can't be oppressed, then they can't be victims of racism. You're just changing the definition of racism to justify discrimination. And even by your definition, a vulnerable white person can still suffer racism from a powerful black person. Race was created by white people so that Europeans could justify the maintenance of the Atlantic trade route, which sustained whole industries upon the stolen resources and labor of indigenous people in the Americas and Africa. Africans sold their own people into slavery, not because of race, but even freed slaves went on to own slaves. That's just internalized racism. But why are we still talking about this? Didn't the civil rights movement rectify racism? It's not rectified until black people get the reparations they deserve. White people shouldn't be punished for the deeds of their ancestors. Black people are being punished for the deeds of white people's ancestors. Most white people are not descendants of slave owners. Yeah, but they still benefit from the economic prosperity that slavery brought to this country. So do black people. If you go back far enough, all of us are descendants of tragedy and horror. Are you all lives mattering me right now? I just don't think that white children should grow up feeling guilty because they're born white. And black children shouldn't be made to feel lazy, dumb, dirty, or violent simply because they're black. Agreed. People should just treat each other equally regardless of race. We tried that, but equal treatment of all races produces unequal outcomes in a racist society. Race-neutral policies have left black people with worse health outcomes, underfunded schools, and mass incarceration. All of those racial inequalities are the trickle-down effect of past racism. But those effects are reinforcing themselves because our institutions are still systemically racist. Things like affirmative action would allow more black students to get into universities. Why can't their merit get them in the universities on their own? Because university admissions are biased towards students that have white values, white educational standards, and white perspectives. Education is education. There is no racial bias in math or science. Of course there is. The search for objective truth is an enlightenment value that privileges truth to the majority perspective. But that's a democracy. Do you know how hard it is for poor black families to escape poverty when their schools are underfunded, medical workers are unfamiliar with black bodies, and predatory lending leaves them drowning in debt? But isn't it possible that black culture's tendency to view their suffering through the lens of racism might be holding black people back? The worst parts of black culture are a product of racism. Rap music might be leading to increased violence. Rap is just a healthy expression of young people's pain and anger. Okay, but soul food isn't the healthiest food in the world. It only became unhealthy because slaves couldn't find or afford the ingredients to the original African recipes. But despite comparable economic conditions, black people on average buy more luxury items like cars and jewelry. Black people don't have the privilege of being respected on sight, and so they buy valuable things to be treated as valuable. But that sounds like class discrimination, not race. They're synonymous in America. Most black people are middle class, and yet that's not what you see in the news. Black crime is all you hear about. And don't even get us started on the over-policing of black neighborhoods. They aren't over-policed, they're under-policed. What? Crime is higher in densely populated cities. Black people are higher in population in those cities. Higher crime in smaller areas means that officers are spread thin, therefore less efficient and more aggressive policing ensues. Plus, black people do commit more racial crimes than white people. No, most black people just live closer to white neighborhoods than white people live close to black neighborhoods. But that doesn't explain why black people commit most of the murders in this country. That's just because white neighborhoods are less policed, so white people are more likely to get away with murder. But black communities are benefiting the most from mass incarceration. Crime rates are dropping. Explain to me how stealing fathers from the home benefits families when having a two-parent home is one of the biggest predictors of health and wealth outcomes in children. Criminals don't make good fathers. Some kids are better off in a one-parent household than a house full of gangbanging and drug dealing. The prison system is creating these criminals by releasing them with more psychological damage than they went in with. That is, if they aren't killed before they're arrested. If it wasn't for social media, police officers wouldn't even be held accountable for their brutality. But it's also social media that fed us the rage that led to riots and looting during the BLM protests. Or they just wanted a reason to go outside. They were fighting for justice. But then the whole anti-racist movement created a cult of white zombies that hated themselves for doing nothing wrong. Ooh, your white fragility is showing. I'm only half white. You're white passing. You don't know me or what I've been through. You might be oppressed, but you aren't oppressed for the color of your skin. Defining me by what I haven't suffered tells you nothing about who I am or what my life is like. Plus, racial diversity quotas have made being white a huge disadvantage to employment, dating, and admissions. No, it just created opportunities for minorities that were once marginalized. And we're only forcing representation until we can remove the obstacles that are keeping diversity from happening naturally. But if we're competing for the same number of jobs based on race, white people, as the majority population, have a far larger pool of people to compete with. Oh my god, why do white people insist on pretending to be oppressed? Because the only alternative given to them is to be racist. Intersectionality has created the oppression Olympics, causing everyone to clamor for any minority status that might move them up the rungs of victimhood. And critical race theory embraces the Marxist idea that if you're not oppressed, you're automatically an oppressor. And they want to teach this to our children. It's the truth! Your wealth is always at the expense of the poor. Do we really want to be teaching kids that a happy, healthy life is reserved for those who have power over others? Better than black kids being confused about why life is so much harder for them than their white counterparts. Why do you think black people think bleaching their skin will make them more desirable? I don't know. White people tan their skin to appear more desirable. That's different. Black people straighten their hair to assimilate into the white workplace, while white girls get butt implants to appropriate black culture. It's not always appropriation. Sometimes it's appreciation. Celebrities using black hairstyles, slangs, trends, and fashion aren't adopting the culture. They're siphoning the attention that should be going to black people. They're also bringing more eyes, money, and power to the culture at the same time. That's how cultures grow. No, that's how they get erased. Integration is cultural genocide for minorities. Culture is supposed to change. It's an evolving toolkit of best practices. That's a colonizer's view of culture. Culture is the memory of our ancestors and the wisdom they passed down to us. Then why, as Americans with cultural influences from around the world, do we keep referring to our culture as whiteness or blackness? Because being black in America is a unique experience. Every black person in America knows what it feels like to be discriminated against. But the assumption that all black people think, feel, and act the same is the same logic that led to racism in the first place. You don't know what it's like growing up without role models in power that look like you. If the only depiction of your race in films is servants and gangsters, you start to assume that's all you're capable of being. What era do you live in? Black people are represented in films as heroes, scholars, presidents, and scientists. Why does it even matter? No one struggles to relate to leads that dress differently or have different hair color from them. We need white people to see power and beauty associated with minorities. It's not just to feel pride in ourselves, it's for other people to understand our perspectives. Sure, but voicing an animated character that's not your race is being treated as if it's blackface. We can discuss that after they take down all the statues of Confederate slave owners. But we can't judge history based on modern ethical standards. But we don't need to glorify them either. I'm pretty sure cancel culture already skewered anyone with racist intent. Overt racism might be dying, but covertly, people still discriminate based on race. Every group of people tends to prefer and feel safe with people similar to them. That implicit bias is still racism. There's only so much microaggression a black person can take. I think you're both mistaking genuine confusion and curiosity for aggression. Most white people only act awkwardly in front of black people because they're scared of saying or doing something that can be seen as offensive. Treating black people like idiots, accusing them of stealing, and belittling service industry workers is not an accident. Nobody's approving of Karen behavior. I was just talking about hair touching and unnecessary compliments. It's gonna take way too much emotional labor to explain this to you. But I want to understand. Don't I deserve that? What are we going to do about it? America is a cultural melting pot, a social experiment that's pushing the limits of humans' capacity to collaborate and empathize with people unlike them. I'd like to think that we still have a chance at proving to the world that human beings can rise above their tribalistic impulses. But both sides of the racial debate aren't even fighting for a just and equal society anymore. We're all just fighting for the right to see ourselves as good people. Racism is alive and thriving, but it's hiding in our disgust for ourselves and our willingness to hurt each other to signal our virtue, to be empathized with, to feel like we belong. All we do is shuck responsibility back and forth by throwing statistics at each other. But there's no amount of data that's going to teach us how to see ourselves and others. Only by working together towards a shared goal, by co-creating culture, businesses, relationships, and art, will we be able to expand our in-group, perhaps one day to the entirety of humanity. Only then will we see clearly that the only obstacle that ever stood between us and the best version of our species was the illusion that we're somehow separate from each other. White people are racist. That statement is racist. White people can't be victims of racism. Any discrimination.
Okay, let's not try and justify racism now. And I know people are going to be like, that's not the intent of the video. I'm not saying that's the intent of the video, but that's what it can lead into. Seen a lot of comments on there saying, oh, I'm about between a yellow and and a blue or whatever it was. I'm a two yellow and an orange. I can't remember what the colours were. And the thing is that like, though I understand the point in the video and it's meant to show like different opinions when it comes to the race argument, but at the end of the day, racism hurts real people in real time. That's both black people and white people, but particularly black people that's hurting, and other cultures and people of colour that is hurt. When I'm seeing people say, oh, I'm between this and that, like it's some like next 16 personalities test, it makes me very uncomfortable. This isn't necessarily to get at the creator, but it does say a lot in terms of having, obviously, don't know his heritage. If you're having someone who's white looking or white passing, sitting amongst these opinions or whatnot, and trying to show as if they're all like they're all okay to have, it makes me really uncomfortable. And then the people in the comments make me uncomfortable as well, because you're not acknowledging that though you have these opinions, like they're not hurting you like they're hurting people who have no choice but to live in a racist and oppressive society. Though the intent is good, like it's once again harming people, and people are not recognizing that, and that's what's infuriating to me. Yes, we should all be able to have debate and reason with each other, but I don't agree with allowing just racism to sit on a spectrum acting as if that's okay, because it's not.
God, all white people are racist. That statement is racist. White people.
Would you have made the same video for anti-Semitism? Would you have gotten online and presented the arguments for anti-Semitism as a valid worldview, and then juxtapose it to the arguments against anti-Semitism? And then conclude your video with saying, neither side of the anti-Semitism debate is interested in a solution. They just want to be perceived as good people. The fact that I even have to use another group for you to see the humanity of black people is insulting. Anti-black racism isn't a talking point. It's a human rights issue. And the fact that you've positioned it as such lets me know that you just have a commitment to being perceived as good rather than actually to justice itself.
White people are racist. That statement is racist. White people can't be victims of racism. Any discrimination.
This video is so wildly insincere. And for you to end it like, oh, neither side of the race debate wants to find a solution. They just want to be seen as good people. How the fuck do you have a centrist view on racism? Do you have a centrist view on anti-Semitism? Nobody makes these videos about anti-Semitism. Like, when it comes to anti-Semitism, y'all just seem to get it. Like, you would have never made a video validating a Holocaust tonight. But the thing is, y'all don't view black people as people. Y'all view us as a fucking talking point.
Aren't even fighting for a just and equal society anymore. We're all just fighting for the right to see ourselves as good.
I never get tired of hating moderate, conservative, two sides are equally as bad, BS, argumentative, because their entire goal is to make you think that radicalism is entirely ridiculous because it asks for too much and demands too much and also distracts people from the reality or is too deeply entrenched in delusion to make sense. And then it rationalizes racists, supremacists, neo-Nazis claim to want to be good people, but in reality are actively trying to oppress everybody that wants rights. Apply this line of thinking to any real issue that we face right now. You know what? The biggest issue isn't really the content creator who's making this drivel, though I truly resent it, but at the end of the day, it's always going to exist. It's the individuals who see content like this and think, hey, you know what? I can see the sense and logic in all of these things. Watching a video constructed by a white man who has no experience with racism. I assume he's white, if not white passing. Regardless of his race, he's not black, and he talks highly about black issues specifically, and yet has no experience being black. Interesting. He then says, and in a very slick way that a lot of people who don't critically think would miss, that the left is using all these data and statistics that don't really mean anything or can't be used in the arguments that they make. And while I agree in a radical sense that data and statistics don't tell a story, because they don't, they're numbers that are used to be implemented within conversations and arguments, that doesn't mean that they're not an important tool to explain what is or isn't happening within society. The same way the right quotes stats and data that don't actually say what they think that it's saying is the same way the left uses data and stats to say things that people don't realize what the stats and data are actually saying. Because in order to understand what something like stats or data is saying, you have to understand the context behind how the data was actually assessed or calculated and actually see what the bigger picture of the narrative is. But all of this doesn't matter to a conservative centrist who thinks that the truth lies in the middle, when the reality is the truth is uncomfortable and involves burning all of what you think and know down. Uncover the fact that we live in a white supremacist society that actively does not care about BIPOC. And BIPOC have been constantly for centuries talking about everything that disadvantages them, only for them to be gaslit, ignored, and silenced. And centrism does even more silencing because it tries to paint this narrative that individuals who are asking for rights are being disillusional and need to realize and cope with the reality that they already have their rights. They just need to be better people or work harder or pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Fighting for a just and equal society anymore. We're all just fighting for the right to see ourselves as good people.
This is what happens when a person who knows nothing about racism, has never experienced racism, makes a video about racism that literally contains no other person of color, no person of color, period, besides some words, besides some text above some chairs. So that means everything he's saying means basically is his own words. The truth is, America is a racist society that has structures in place and systems in place to stop people of color from transcending in their existence as people and just reaching a higher level in the society. Black people did not choose to be poor or choose to be low income. We were forced into a situation where the only way to survive was by doing illegal activity. So when there's a bunch of people robbing and stealing to feed themselves, who's the bad guy? The person who's robbing and stealing to feed themselves, or the person who put them in that situation to begin with? And if you can understand that simple thing, you will understand why there isn't two sides to this story. There's one side who's like, yo, this person's bullying me, and there's the bully trying to justify their bullying. And then he goes on this whole tirade about how we're just arguing to be seen as good people and we're not trying to fight to reach to be treated equally anymore. But isn't that what you're literally doing? Isn't you by sitting in the middle of this argument just you trying to be seen as a good person because you're too afraid to put your foot forward and be like, hey, this is wrong and I stand on this? But instead, no. Instead, you were like, yo, I want to make content. I want to make money. So I'm going to make a video putting both arguments about race in it. So then I don't get in trouble and then people can just yell in my comments. Because you knew if you did choose a side, there is less views, you were just afraid of the backlash you would get from choosing a side. But you know what's wrong and you know what's right. And that's why centrists are so weird to me. Because you are the problem.
First of all, this is a white person that tried to put himself, or maybe to just bring up this argument right here. He tried to put himself in different types of people's shoes with different types of opinions, or should I say sides, and then he brings them out as, some sort of an argument. Or yeah, it's an argument, it's not a discussion, right? But this is somebody who is not really in the face or in the experience of what it really means to be black or colored person. And of course, yes, everybody has been reading and seeing things, but the extent to which you're going to actually analyze something and break it down and be full of spirit with it might require some sort of experience. You know what I mean? It's like you're trying to be inclusive and be part of the good guy team and trying to say everybody has had their own face in this, or possibly be the middle, like what's happening here, because you're afraid of what people are gonna say, right? Like, get it together, bro. Get it together. I don't know what you guys think, so make sure you comment in the comment section. Let's discuss down there, because this is it's just centered, like it's too centered. It's definitely not having me like, yay, now we have a solution. I'll see you in the comment section. Remember to watch more videos like this on this channel.